Hello everyone, and welcome to the Smiling Frame channel. Please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a thumbs up. Today, we are going to be discussing the movie The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, which was released in 2011. The smoky haze of underground street racing in Tokyo serves as the backdrop for Sean Boswell's unwelcome arrival. He's not exactly thriving in his life back in the States, bouncing from one drifting contest to another, often ending up in trouble, much to the chagrin of his already strained relationship with his mother. When his latest escapade nearly lands him in serious legal jeopardy, the only solution is a transatlantic relocation to live with his estranged father, who is stationed in Japan. This move is less a fresh start and more an enforced exile. Tokyo, initially a bewildering landscape of neon and rigid social structures, feels alienating. Sean, still carrying the chip of an American street racer who relies on raw power rather than finesse, struggles to find his footing. His attempt to impress a local girl, Neela, ends disastrously during an impromptu race against Takashi, a local kingpin nicknamed the Drift King, who happens to be the nephew of a powerful Yakuza boss. Sean's American muscle car simply can't handle the intricate, high-speed ballet of Japanese drifting, and he is utterly humiliated, his ride destroyed. Humiliation, however, is a powerful motivator, especially for a young man trying to prove himself. Sean finds an unlikely mentor in Han Lu, a charismatic figure who operates outside the strict hierarchy of the local racing scene. Han, with his cool demeanor and almost philosophical approach to speed, recognizes something raw in Sean. We see glimpses of Han's past, a man who learned the hard way about loyalty and the perils of high-stakes crime, hinting at a previous connection to the crew from the first film, perhaps having moved beyond his life of petty theft and focusing on the art of the drive. Han teaches Sean the essence of drifting. It's not about overpowering the car. It's about finding the perfect balance, trusting the machine, and letting instinct take over. Under Han's tutelage, Sean transforms his driving style, moving from brute force to subtle control. The narrative tightens around the rivalry with Takashi. Takashi views the races not just as sport, but as a demonstration of dominance, fueled by jealousy over Neela, who is clearly drawn to Sean's genuine passion and Han's mentorship. The stakes are raised considerably because this racing circuit is interwoven with the Yakuza's illicit operations, making every drift potentially lethal. Sean, now mastering the art, begins to challenge Takashi's authority. The climax builds toward a final, winner-takes-all confrontation. During a tense race, the inherent danger of their lifestyle finally catches up to Han. In a moment that feels both inevitable and tragic, Han sacrifices himself, ensuring Sean and Neela escape a fatal confrontation engineered by Takashi's uncle. This loss solidifies Sean's resolve. The race is no longer about proving himself, but about honoring the man who saved him. The final race takes place on a treacherous mountain pass, an apt setting for a duel where precision is paramount. Sean, driving a surprisingly capable Nissan Silvia S15 gifted to him by Han's associates, squares off against Takashi's superior machine. The race is a masterclass in controlled chaos. Sean utilizes everything Han taught him, employing risky maneuvers and exploiting the terrain. In a pivotal moment, Sean manages to knock Takashi off the road without wrecking his own car, a perfect execution of the drifting philosophy. With Takashi defeated and disgraced, Sean finds his place, not just in the racing scene, but finally with Neela. He has navigated the cultural chasm and the professional hazards, emerging as a respected figure, the new inheritor of the drifting legacy forged in the asphalt jungles of Tokyo. The film concludes with a sense of earned respect, acknowledging that true speed comes from connection, skill, and accepting the inherent risks that come with living life on the edge. The initial culture shock for Sean was palpable. He wasn't just dealing with a different style of driving. He was grappling with a different philosophy entirely. Back in the States, his father's frustration stemmed from Sean's inability to channel his competitive spirit constructively, leading to brawls and reckless abandon behind the wheel of his aging muscle car. Tokyo presented a world where precision, not horsepower, dictated survival. The sheer volume of the city, the relentless pace, amplified Sean's insecurity. He clung to the notion that sheer American engine might could overcome any technical deficit, a belief quickly shattered by Takashi's flawless execution. Takashi, with his tailored suits and air of inherited authority, represented everything Sean despised, privilege masking predatory intent. His movements were economical, his temper thinly veiled beneath an icy exterior, reflecting the high-stakes pressure imposed by his Yakuza connections. Neela, caught between these two worlds, possessed a quiet resilience. She saw past Sean's clumsy attempts at bravado, recognizing the genuine fire in his desire to improve, a fire that mirrored her own yearning for autonomy from the suffocating structure of the local scene. Han Louis, in stark contrast to the overt aggression of Takashi, exuded effortless cool. His philosophy wasn't just about cars, it was about presence. When Han spoke of balancing the drift, it felt like he was dispensing life advice honed over years of navigating dangerous compromises. It was easy to see why figures like Han, who seemed connected to the globe-trotting adventures of the earlier street racers, found themselves drawn to Tokyo, a place where one could disappear into the blur of speed while still commanding respect. Han taught Sean to feel the asphalt through the tires, to anticipate the slide rather than react to it, treating the complex physics of drifting like a conversation with the car itself. This mentorship was more than just driving lessons. It was an apprenticeship in navigating a sophisticated criminal underworld without becoming its victim. The palpable tension surrounding the races stemmed from the understanding that losing meant not just losing face, but potentially losing everything. The Yakuza's involvement meant that the side bets and the protection money flowed directly into dangerous pockets. When Han finally faced his end, it wasn't a glorious, fiery explosion of an accident, but a calculated, brutal act designed to eliminate a perceived threat and send a message. The way Han manipulated the situation to save Sean, ensuring the young American had the necessary breathing room to escape with Neela, spoke volumes about his deeper commitment to protecting those who genuinely embraced the purity of the drive, separate from the crime element. Sean's final drive against Takashi was a testament to internalized learning. He wasn't just driving fast, he was driving Han's way, smart, controlled, and opportunistic. The mountain road, switchback after switchback, demanded perfect modulation of throttle and steering. Takashi drove aggressively, attempting to force Sean into a mistake through brute intimidation, but Sean met that aggression with calculated counter-steering, mirroring Han's teachings perfectly. The final maneuver, using the banking of the turn to nudge Takashi's vehicle just enough to disrupt his line without incurring a penalty on his own car, was a visual representation of Sean having absorbed the spirit of the art. He didn't conquer the mountain through power. He won by mastering the physics Han had imparted. Stepping out of that car, having earned the respect of the Tokyo underground, not through inheritance or intimidation, but through sheer, hard-won skill, Sean finally belonged. The weight of Han's sacrifice settled heavily on Sean, transforming his youthful recklessness into a grim determination. It wasn't the thrill of victory that drove him now. It was a debt owed in the currency of survival and respect. His relationship with Neela deepened in the shadow of shared danger. She saw the transformation in him, the way his eyes no longer darted nervously around, but focused with unnerving clarity on the road ahead. Neela, herself a talented driver who had been constrained by the expectations surrounding Takashi, found in Sean an ally who valued her skill independently of her connections. Their bond felt forged in the high-octane crucible of the Tokyo nights. The atmosphere leading up to the final showdown was thick with unspoken threats. Takashi was unraveling, his carefully constructed facade of control cracking under the pressure of his uncle's mounting impatience. He viewed Sean not merely as a rival, but as a corrosive outsider infecting the established order. For Takashi, drifting was a performance of status, a sterile demonstration of wealth and inherited power. For Sean, guided by Han's memory, it had become an act of genuine artistic expression under duress. The mountain run, the classic Touge, demanded a level of intimacy with the machine Sean hadn't previously understood. He wasn't just piloting the car, he was an extension of its chassis, feeling the subtle shifts in traction that Han had drilled into him. When Sean executed the crucial maneuver, nudging Takashi off the optimal line, it wasn't luck. It was the application of a difficult, counterintuitive lesson. Sometimes, the fastest way through a corner is the one that requires the car to momentarily lose control, only to be snatched back from the abyss. It was the visual manifestation of Han's core belief. Control is found in the acceptance of chaos. Takashi's defeat was absolute, precisely because it wasn't a crash or a technical failure. It was a demonstration of superior mastery over the very discipline Takashi claimed to own. Watching Takashi's finely tuned machine slide helplessly off the racing line, Sean felt a quiet closure, not triumph over an enemy, but the completion of a painful, necessary education. When the dust settled and the roar of the engines faded, Sean's acceptance into the Tokyo racing community felt earned, etched into the skid marks he left behind. He carried Han's legacy forward, understanding that the essence of street racing, at its purest, transcends borders and criminal affiliations. It is a pure pursuit of man and machine conquering physics. His future, intertwined now with Neela's, and paved with the lessons learned in the shadow of the Yakuza, promised continued speed, but with a newfound, profound respect for the cost of living life at the limit. The aftermath of the mountain race brought a necessary, if temporary, stillness to the frenetic Tokyo streets. Sean now recognized not as the clumsy American import, but as the skilled driver who humbled Takashi, found a brief period of respite. This newfound status, however, came with an unspoken obligation: to honor the memory of Han Lue. The community, scarred by the Yakuza's direct interference, recognized that Han had died protecting the integrity of the drive and the potential of the younger generation. Sean and Neela spent time together, not just celebrating victory, but quietly absorbing the lessons left behind, the subtle organizational structure Han maintained, the network of trusted mechanics and financiers who valued skill over brute force. Their quiet partnership caught the attention of external observers. The narrative subtly shifts here, hinting at the broader world these underground racers inhabit. A significant detail emerges. The car Han was driving, the one implicated in his tragic finale, was not simply abandoned. It was recovered, meticulously inspected by associates loyal to Han's memory, suggesting a deeper game was always in play, one that extended beyond the local turf wars. This clandestine investigation reveals that Han's demise was not the clean hit Takashi's uncle intended. There were discrepancies, loose ends suggesting Han might have orchestrated a more complex exit than initially perceived, perhaps anticipating betrayal or danger from those higher up the Yakuza food chain. This looming sense of unresolved business provides the emotional catalyst for Sean's next move. He realizes that achieving true mastery means understanding the larger ecosystem of global street racing, the very environment that drew figures like Han in the first place. His connection to Neela solidifies his commitment to staying, to building a legitimate future within the Tokyo scene. But first, he needs to ensure the shadows surrounding Han's legacy are fully dispelled. The film gestures toward a wider network, perhaps an echo of the earlier Crewes, implying that the fast life is interconnected globally, and that loyalty, once earned, transcends national boundaries. Sean understands that to truly step into Han's shoes, he must be prepared for the long game, a race not against a rival, but against the pervasive reach of organized crime that seeks to corrupt genuine talent. The quiet promise between Sean and Neela is built on the foundation of this dangerous, unspoken legacy. The brief period of peace was deceptive, a thin veneer over the volatile reality of Tokyo's underbelly. Sean and Neela found themselves navigating a strange new status. They were heroes to some, dangerous liabilities to others. The atmosphere shifted from one of personal rivalry to one of systemic caution. The Yakuza, though momentarily checked by Takashi's humiliation, were not defeated. They were merely annoyed, their deep-seated need for control demanding a strategic retreat before another outburst. Sean felt this surveillance constantly. Every garage visit, every late-night drive felt scrutinized. He noticed the subtle glances from veteran racers who now deferred to him, a deference laced with concern. They respected his skill, but feared the heat he had drawn. The investigation into Han's supposed final moments became an obsession shared quietly between Sean and Neela. They worked with Han's inner circle, a collection of mechanics and tech specialists who operated with the precision of surgeons and the secrecy of spies. These were the people Han trusted to keep the machinery running and the books clean, individuals who viewed pure speed as a legitimate business, uncorrupted by territorial gangsterism. They discovered subtle modifications made to Han's last vehicle, modifications that suggested not an accidental demise, but a calculated exit strategy. The car's telemetry, painstakingly recovered, implied that Han might have deliberately thrown off the tracking systems right before the impact, suggesting he was never truly trapped, but rather executed a highly advanced vanishing act. This revelation added layers of awe and sorrow to Han's memory. He was not just a mentor who died heroically, but a strategist who outmaneuvered far more powerful enemies. This complex background galvanized Sean. His initial desire to simply survive and win transformed into a duty to uphold Han's true narrative, that of a master tactician who walked the line between the legitimate world of automotive passion and the dangerous demands of the criminal enterprise. Neela, ever the pragmatist, focused on securing their operational base, utilizing her deep local knowledge to ensure their movements were invisible to the Yakuza's eyes. She reminded Sean that running fast was useless if you couldn't disappear when the light wasn't shining on you. Their evolving relationship was now less about youthful flirtation and more about shared survival, a partnership built on mutual competency in a world that valued neither weakness nor sentimentality. They understood that the next race, if it came, would not be for bragging rights or a girl's attention, but for survival and the defense of Han's enduring legacy against those who sought to erase his memory by painting him as a simple casualty. The pursuit of Han's true fate propelled Sean and Neela into the deeper currents of the global street racing undercurrent. The meticulous examination of Han's vehicle yielded more than just telemetry data. It exposed a hidden compartment containing encrypted communications logs. These logs pointed toward a secretive, high-stakes international event, a convergence of the world's most elite drivers, operating completely outside the purview of local crime syndicates like the Yakuza. Han, it became clear, was not merely a local drifting expert. He was an established player in a much grander arena, a man whose reputation preceded him across continents, likely linking him back to the illicit but highly organized racing circles familiar to Dom Toretto and his associates from Los Angeles. This discovery reframed everything. Han hadn't fled to Tokyo for quiet retirement. He was operating on a temporary, high-security assignment, using the Japanese drifting scene as a sophisticated cover. Sean felt a rush of understanding mixed with profound loss. His mentor had been far more complex and successful than his casual demeanor suggested. The messages hinted at a dangerous delivery or a critical piece of information Han was transporting, something so valuable that its potential exposure justified the extreme lengths the Yakuza went to silence him. Neela, utilizing her intuitive grasp of local contacts, managed to trace one of the encrypted contacts to a seemingly legitimate import-export business operating near the docks, a known front for international smuggling. This introduced a new, colder brand of adversary, professional operators who valued efficiency over theatrical displays of dominance, a stark contrast to Takashi's hot-headed management. Sean now understood that his raw talent, honed by Han, needed to be weaponized against calculated professionalism. His American upbringing, once a liability in the nuanced world of Japanese drifting, now offered an unexpected advantage, an outsider's perspective capable of disrupting established patterns. The emotional core of their pursuit became fiercely protective. Neela was driven by the need to clear Han's name of any implication of cowardly betrayal to his associates, while Sean was driven by the desire to prove himself worthy of the advanced knowledge Han imparted. Their final preparation wasn't for another local drift challenge, but for an insertion into this larger, more dangerous network. They knew that confronting the architects of Han's apparent disappearance would demand more than just sliding through a corner perfectly. It would require strategic planning, impeccable timing, and the willingness to walk directly into the viper's nest Han had so carefully navigated for years. The unspoken promise to Han was no longer just about driving well. It was about finishing the mission he started, ensuring his true story, that of a respected, strategic operator, was the one that prevailed. The encrypted logs became their blueprint, illuminating a global tapestry of speed that made the Tokyo underground seem like a local garage meet. Sean realized Han's coolness wasn't indifference. It was supreme focus, cultivated by operating at the apex of international illicit motorsport. The contacts Neela uncovered weren't local thugs. They were highly organized couriers and fixers, people who moved assets, not just cars, across borders. This understanding infused Sean's driving with a new gravity. Every turn now held the potential consequence of international exposure or permanent disappearance. Neela's local expertise proved invaluable as they prepared to engage this higher echelon. She guided them through the logistical maze of the docks, teaching Sean how to read the subtle body language of professional enforcers versus impulsive street thugs. She emphasized camouflage over confrontation. They needed to appear as just another skilled pair, blending into the vast network, not as the angry upstarts seeking vengeance for a perceived loss. Her quiet confidence was a bedrock for Sean, whose inherent American tendency was to charge directly at obstacles. She tempered his aggression with surgical precision. The mechanics loyal to Han didn't just fix cars. They were data analysts disguised as grease monkeys. They confirmed that the communication device Han used was not destroyed, but remotely activated to send a final, coded burst after his apparent death. This burst contained coordinates pointing toward a hidden handover point outside the immediate city limits, a place far removed from the Yakuza's immediate territorial control. It suggested Han had planned to meet someone critical, someone who understood the wider context of his activities. When Sean finally accessed the final, partial recording from that hidden device, the emotion was overwhelming. Han's voice, calm despite the implied danger, wasn't speaking of debt or immediate survival. He was speaking of an obligation to protect specific information that, if revealed, would dismantle an entire operation far larger than the Yakuza's local rackets. He sounded resigned, but ultimately proud, acknowledging that handing the baton to Sean was a calculated risk he was willing to take. The connection wasn't merely mentorship, it was the passing of a highly sensitive torch. Sean felt the mantle settle upon his shoulders. He wasn't just a drifting champion now. He was the custodian of Han's final, most critical mission. Their journey was transforming from a local vendetta into a high-stakes intelligence operation cloaked in the guise of a street race. The coordinates led Sean and Neela far from the neon glare of Shibuya, out into the sparsely populated industrial outskirts, where anonymity was easily bought with shadows and rusted steel. This location felt different, sterile, calculated, lacking the visceral energy of the underground meets. It suggested business, not sport. They drove in Han's last gift to Sean, a heavily modified vehicle that felt less like a car and more like a tightly wound extension of Sean's own will, humming with subtle, high-tech enhancements courtesy of Han's unseen network. As they approached the designated rendezvous point, an abandoned shipping yard bathed in the eerie glow of sodium lamps, the silence was the loudest indicator of danger. There were no spectators, no casual onlookers, just the rhythmic clang of metal shifting in the sea breeze, masking any potential surveillance. Sean felt the familiar prickle of adrenaline, but this time it was tempered by a cold, analytical focus inherited from studying Han's final moves. Neela, scanning the periphery with a professional's eye, pointed out the subtly positioned security cameras, not the crude surveillance of street gangs, but high-resolution optical gear used by corporate entities or government-adjacent security firms. They were intercepted not by Yakuza foot soldiers, but by two imposing figures dressed in nondescript, dark tactical gear. These men moved with disconcerting synchronization, displaying the economy of motion typical of highly trained operatives who had specialized in extraction or asset retrieval. Their presence confirmed that Han's final assignment involved something far beyond local protection money. One of the men produced a small metallic device, the exact type Han used for his encrypted communications, and held it out. This was the key, the final piece of the puzzle Han had hidden. The tension peaked when Sean, instead of immediately handing over the device, paused. He wasn't challenging them physically. He was testing their mandate. He needed confirmation that they served Han's true purpose, not just the organization that betrayed him. Neela subtly shifted her stance, ready to provide a diversion if necessary. Finally, the lead operative spoke, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He said the driver must understand the drift before inheriting the cargo. It was Han's signature language, a final password confirming their legitimacy. Upon receiving the device, Sean initiated the final sequence. It didn't unlock a vault of cash or weapons. Instead, it projected a holographic map detailing the extensive global supply chain Han was attempting to disrupt. A massive network funneling illicit technology using race circuits as cover for distribution routes. Han hadn't been trying to run from the Yakuza. He had been systematically dismantling a superior, more dangerous entity that used organized crime as a convenient, disposable layer. The weight of this responsibility settled upon Sean. His victory over Takashi was merely the clearing of the local pests. This new race was against global machinations, a challenge that required not just masterful drifting, but deep strategic planning and the courage to become ghosts in the system. This revelation redefined his relationship with Neela. They were no longer just racers. They were now inheritors of a vital, global secret, bound by the memory of a man who understood that the fastest way to change the world was to move faster than anyone expected. The holographic map spun before them, a dizzying network of interconnected global hubs, revealing the true scale of Han's clandestine war. It wasn't about turf. It was about control over highly specialized, untraceable technology, components that could disrupt everything from global communications to defense systems. Sean stared, recognizing the gravity of the inheritance. Han hadn't just taught him to drive. He had inducted him into a world where speed was the ultimate form of espionage, where a perfectly executed drift could erase digital footprints or secure critical asset transfer. The sheer audacity of Han's plan, using the colorful, chaotic world of street racing as a smokescreen for dismantling a quasi-corporate criminal operation, was breathtaking. The tactical operatives, revealed now as Han's trusted international contingency, treated Sean and Neela with a newfound respect, acknowledging them as the successful inheritors of the Tokyo test phase. They explained that Han's death was an integral part of the plan, designed to sever his immediate ties to the Yakuza and draw the attention of the primary antagonists away from the sensitive data transfer. The Yakuza were merely the pawns, cleaning up a mess they didn't fully comprehend. Neela, ever the grounded strategist, immediately began cross-referencing the holographic routes with known shipping manifests she had access to through her less-than-legal contacts. She realized that the timing of Han's final planned move coincided exactly with a major, legitimate international logistics summit taking place on the coast, the perfect cover for the final exchange. Her face, usually reserved, held a fire of vindication. Han hadn't been killed by a jealous rival. He had executed a flawless, multi-layered operational feint. Sean felt a surge of professional pride, realizing Han's admiration hadn't been sentimental. It was rooted in potential. The lessons weren't about style. They were about survival under the most extreme pressure. He looked at the complex web of routes and understood that their next move required precision driving on an unprecedented scale, navigating secure ports, evading aerial surveillance, and making split-second decisions that balanced maintaining cover with executing the actual objective. The final stage of their engagement with the contingency involved a simulated run, a practice session where the operatives used military-grade drones and electronic countermeasures to test Sean's ability to maintain the integrity of the data transfer package under simulated hostile conditions. Sean drove not with reckless abandon, but with the cold, calculated finesse Han had drilled into him, treating the electronic countermeasures like invisible drift barriers. He wasn't just fast, he was unpredictable to algorithms. As the simulation ended, the lead operative simply nodded, handing Sean a small, hardened drive containing the core of Han's accumulated intelligence. The message was clear. The training wheels were off. Sean and Neela were now fully operational, carrying the responsibility of a man whose shadow stretched across the globe, a legacy built not on mere horsepower, but on brilliant, high-speed strategy. Their life in Tokyo had just become infinitely more dangerous and infinitely more meaningful. The hardened drive felt cold and dense in Sean's palm, a tangible symbol of the immense trust Han had placed in him. The transition from local underground champion to custodian of international technological secrets was dizzying, yet strangely, it felt right. The Tokyo cityscape, once a bewildering maze of bright lights and confusing customs, now appeared as a chessboard, every major intersection and port a potential staging ground for conflict. Sean and Neela understood that the true race wasn't on asphalt. It was in the digital shadows and the crowded international shipping lanes. Neela became indispensable in translating this abstract threat into actionable intelligence. She utilized her connections, built through years of navigating the gray areas of Tokyo's commerce, to secure a discreet, high-speed vessel capable of moving undetected near the coastal summit. Her demeanor, usually calm under pressure, now carried an edge of focused urgency. She wasn't just protecting Sean. She was securing Han's final act of defiance against those who sought to weaponize speed and secrecy. The operatives, who identified themselves only by code names referencing various physics constants, briefed them on the nature of the technology, a quantum encryption key that Han had managed to clone before his planned disappearance. This key, if handed over to the wrong party at the summit, could neutralize global tracking systems, effectively rendering vast swathes of legitimate and illicit commerce invisible. Han's goal was to ensure the key fell into the hands of a specific, trustworthy, international regulatory body Han had cultivated over years, a task that now fell squarely on Sean's shoulders. Sean's final preparation focused entirely on the vehicle they would use for the critical transfer near the port. It wasn't a flashy, customized drift car. It was a utilitarian, high-torque machine optimized for rapid acceleration and handling unpredictable terrain, a vehicle capable of slipping through security checkpoints that would stop a conventional sports car. He practiced emergency braking drills and high-speed maneuvering in tight mock port environments designed by the contingency team, forcing himself to rely solely on instinct and the machine's raw capability, free from the ego of performance driving. He was learning to drive defensively, strategically, a far cry from the aggressive style that first got him into trouble back home. The night of the transfer was thick with coastal fog, lending an almost supernatural quality to their movements. They approached the designated handover point, a decommissioned oil tanker moored just outside the main shipping lanes. As they piloted their vehicle onto the tanker's deck, Sean looked back at Neela. There was no youthful romance in their shared glance, only the grim acknowledgement of shared destiny and absolute commitment. They weren't just carrying a drive, they were carrying the final wishes of a friend and the stability of a global order Han believed in. They had embraced the philosophy that the fastest path forward often requires navigating the most dangerous corners first. The game had escalated beyond the streets, and Sean, the American kid who couldn't handle a simple drift, was now poised to execute the most critical drive of his life. The air on the oil tanker deck was heavy with brine and the low thrum of powerful, idling machinery. This was not the exhilarating, noisy atmosphere of a street race. It was the suffocating silence of a high-stakes negotiation where the currency was information and the penalty for failure was far greater than a totaled car. Sean felt the weight of the hardened drive pressing against his ribs, an anchor in the rising tide of anxiety. He and Neela had successfully navigated the surface level of Han's contingency, but the final exchange demanded a level of operational stealth that felt alien to their high-octane upbringing. The contact they were meeting was not another racer, but a representative from the international agency Han had groomed, a woman whose presence exuded quiet authority and an almost chillingly efficient demeanor. She stepped out of a discreetly positioned security launch, her expression unreadable. She offered no pleasantries, acknowledging the shared danger immediately. "The clock is running faster than you think," she stated, her eyes flicking towards the dark horizon where heavy commercial vessels moved like silent predators. She confirmed Han's prearrangement. The key was necessary to neutralize the quantum encryption before the opposing faction could deploy their assets. Sean presented the drive, but before handing it over, he paused, echoing the protocol Han had enforced during their own mentorship. "Confirmation. Han's directive," Sean said, his voice steady despite the internal tremor. The woman produced a small antique compass, similar to one Han was often seen fiddling with. She didn't speak, but tapped the glass twice in a specific rhythm, the same pattern Han used to check his watch before launching into a major drift sequence. It was a final, silent nod from the organization that confirmed Han's legacy was true, that his death served a greater, necessary end. The transfer was executed flawlessly. As the woman secured the drive, she offered a single, parting piece of advice that resonated deeply with Sean's journey. Han always knew that true mastery wasn't about staying ahead of the competition. It was about controlling the environment in which the competition took place. "You've learned the drift. Now learn the system." With that, the security launch slipped back into the fog, taking with it the immediate danger, but leaving Sean and Neela adrift in the consequences of their actions. The immediate threat neutralized, the tension receded, replaced by a profound sense of completion mixed with uncertainty. They had honored Han. They had stepped out of the role of reactive racers and into that of strategic participants in a far larger conflict. Looking back toward the distant glow of the Tokyo skyline, Sean knew that their paths might diverge from the familiar rumble of street racing forever. The lessons learned about balance, control, and leveraging chaos were now applicable to an entirely different kind of high-stakes environment. Neela leaned against him, not in exhaustion, but in solidarity. Their shared future was no longer defined by escaping trouble, but by navigating the complex, often invisible currents of global power, all thanks to the drifting philosopher who taught them how to truly drive. The departure from the tanker marked not an end, but a deliberate pivot. As their small craft cut silently through the pre-dawn water, leaving the towering silhouette of the decommissioned vessel behind, Sean felt a strange mixture of triumph and acute loneliness. The immediate danger had subsided, but the vastness of the operation Han had been running suddenly felt immense and crushing. The world, once simplified by the singular objective of outdriving the rival, was now a sprawling map of geopolitical chess moves disguised as logistics. Neela, now their de facto mission coordinator, studied the horizon with the focus of a hawk tracking prey. Her pragmatic resilience was hardening into something almost formidable. She had shed the last vestiges of the constrained daughter of a minor local player. She was now a critical nexus in an international operation. "They won't stop looking for the data we just secured, Sean," she stated, her voice low against the engine's hum. "The Yakuza were just the symptom. We just took the key out of the central lock. The architects of that system will be looking for the next logical point of failure. Us." Sean nodded, gripping the wheel of their low-profile speedboat. He felt the absence of Han acutely. There was no wise, cryptic voice to offer guidance on this new, digitized battlefield. He had to internalize Han's strategic calm. He remembered Han's lesson about the Ma, the crucial space between action and reaction. In this new context, Ma wasn't about finding traction mid-drift. It was about timing their disappearance from Tokyo before the global network realized the encryption key had been secured by the former protege of the man they thought they'd eliminated. They decided to utilize the infrastructure Han had subtly built, not just for car maintenance, but for vanishing. Han's network wasn't just mechanics. It included specialists in forgery, discreet travel logistics, and information warfare. People who specialized in making things, or people, not exist when necessary. Their next destination, routed through the forged documents Neela procured, was a quiet hub in Southeast Asia, a place known for its labyrinthine legal loopholes and its deep, untraceable transit routes. a necessary purgatory before they could decide their next move. Sean looked down at his hands, still faintly smelling of high-grade racing fuel and salt spray. He realized that the competitive fire his father had feared had finally found its constructive outlet, warped though the circumstances were. He was using his unique understanding of speed and control, not for glory, but for preservation, preserving Han's work and preserving their lives together. The reckless abandon was gone, replaced by a sober understanding that in this new game, the most impressive move wasn't the fastest one, but the one that successfully deceived the enemy into looking the wrong way entirely. Their escape from Tokyo was their ultimate drift, a calculated move into the shadows, trusting that the momentum Han had created would carry them far enough to plan their next confrontation. The journey eastward was a study in enforced minimalism. The vibrant, overwhelming sensory input of Tokyo was replaced by the muted greens and oppressive humidity of the Southeast Asian transit point, a bustling port city where identities were fluid and loyalties were traded as easily as cargo manifests. Sean and Neela existed in a state of perpetual low-level alertness. They shed their racing personas like ill-fitting costumes, adopting the quiet, observant roles of international smugglers or low-level tech traders. Neela excelled here. The cultural nuance she possessed, previously used to navigate the delicate hierarchy of the Tokyo underground, was now deployed to manage forged documents and secure safe houses tucked away in the less scrutinized industrial sectors. She moved through the crowded markets with an almost unnatural grace, her eyes perpetually calculating escape vectors and potential eavesdroppers. Her relationship with Sean solidified into a near-telepathic operational partnership. There was no longer any need for verbal confirmation on small decisions. A shared glance across a crowded street was enough to signal caution or proceed. For Sean, the transition was jarring. His entire physical being was calibrated for the explosive, immediate feedback of a high-G corner. Here, movement was slow, deliberate, often involving hours of waiting in stifling heat for a 5-minute transaction. He battled an internal restlessness, a desperate need to move. He channeled this energy into relentless study, immersing himself in the digital architecture of Han's encryption key, trying to grasp the underlying principles that governed the technological landscape Han had navigated. He wasn't just learning the theory of speed anymore. He was learning the theory of invisibility. The safe house they finally settled into was Spartan: concrete walls, reinforced doors, and a single, weak satellite link. It was here that the contingency team, who had guided them from the tanker, made their final, cautious contact. They were not there to offer continued protection, but to provide one last, vital piece of context. They confirmed that the corporation Han was working against, a shadowy consortium known only by the moniker the Syndicate, was utilizing the world's legitimate racing circuits, particularly endurance events and closed-circuit testing facilities, as cover for their major asset movements. The Syndicate viewed high-speed, high-visibility motorsport as the perfect distraction for low-visibility, high-value transfers. Han was planning to expose their next major operation during the Macau Grand Prix, the lead operative revealed, projecting schematics onto a dusty wall. He intended to use a staged accident during the warm-up laps to force the system to flag the anomalous data packets he was transmitting. He didn't just want to pass the key, he wanted to blow the whistle publicly, on a stage too bright for them to cover up easily. This revelation hit Sean with the force of a physical blow. Han's sacrifice was meant to be an explosion of truth, not a quiet disappearance. His mentor hadn't just been running a defensive operation, he was initiating an attack. Sean looked at Neela, a shared understanding passing between them. Their journey wasn't over. It had simply relocated to a grander, more perilous stage. They were no longer running from something. They were driving towards a globally televised event, tasked with completing a mission that promised not just survival, but a chance to truly avenge Han by exposing the organization that orchestrated his death in the most public arena possible. The quietude of their current hiding spot was merely the calm before the most publicized storm yet. The narrative architecture of the Fast and the Furious. Tokyo Drift, despite its occasional structural awkwardness, as the third installment in a series built on character continuity that was initially fractured, offers a fascinating case study in franchise adaptation and cultural transplantation. It functions less as a direct sequel and more as a vital, albeit often critically dismissed, bridge, introducing key thematic elements that would later define the global scale of the saga. Sean Boswell, as portrayed, embodies a familiar archetype of the alienated American youth, an underdog whose inherent talent for driving, a skill rooted more in reckless instinct than formal training, is his only reliable outlet. His expulsion from his comfortable American life and forced relocation to Tokyo is the catalyst for true transformation. This move isn't just a change of scenery, it's a necessary immersion into a fundamentally different automotive culture. His background, notably distant from the established core cast of the earlier films, allows the narrative to explore a new subgenre of street racing: drifting. Drifting, unlike the straight-line drag races favored in Los Angeles, demands spatial awareness, precision, and a symbiotic relationship with the car, demanding a mastery that Sean initially lacks entirely. The film's greatest strength lies in its detailed exploration of this Japanese tuning and racing scene. The presentation of Dorofudo is treated with near reverence, contrasting sharply with the raw power focus of the earlier entries. The visual language employed, the tight shots of counter-steering, the calculated chaos of tandem drifting, immerses the viewer in the sensory overload of this world. This cultural specificity is anchored by Han Lu, who becomes the essential mentor figure. Sung Kang's portrayal of Han is smooth, enigmatic, and carries an air of lived experience that immediately commands respect. Han is positioned as the master craftsman, operating not just within the rules of the street, but as a philosopher of the drive. His personal code, a mixture of fatalism and disciplined enjoyment of the moment, provides the necessary emotional ballast for Sean's youthful impulsiveness. Han's presence here is crucial. His backstory, subtly hinted at, and later fully fleshed out in subsequent franchise entries, retroactively grants this standalone film significant canonical weight. He represents the seasoned professional who understands the inherent risks, making his lessons to Sean resonate with genuine stakes. The aesthetic of Tokyo Drift is deliberately stylized. The neon-drenched urban sprawl, the hyper-detailed tuning culture exemplified by RWB Porsches and highly modified Nissans, and the shift from the low-rider tuner aesthetic of Dom Toretto's crew to the high-grip, precision engineering of Japanese import performance, marks a significant tonal pivot for the franchise. This environment forces Sean to evolve rapidly. He cannot rely on brute force. He must learn finesse. His initial failures, the spectacularly messy first attempt at drifting, serve as necessary humbling moments, mirroring the protagonist's journey from arrogant novice to competent practitioner. The villainous counterpoint, Takashi, or DK, Drift King, functions as the gatekeeper to this exclusive world. His lineage and inherited status in the Tokyo underground place him squarely in opposition to Sean's outsider status. Takashi's driving style is technically flawless, but emotionally vacant, representing mastery without soul, a direct contrast to the intuitive, passionate driving Sean eventually learns from Han. The climax, where Sean manages to beat the established Drift King through sheer willpower and a willingness to take unprecedented risks, a strategy rooted in Han's advice to embrace the flow, is less about vehicular superiority and more about cultural assimilation and personal triumph over self-doubt. While critics often point to the narrative gaps concerning the main characters of the first two films, this displacement was arguably a calculated risk that paid off. By shifting the focus geographically and stylistically, the film prevented stagnation, introducing a visually arresting new corner of the street racing universe. It allowed the franchise to audition new talent and develop crucial mythology, Han's character arc, that would later anchor the entire ensemble when Vin Diesel and Paul Walker returned for the franchise's revitalization, cementing Tokyo Drift's legacy not as an outlier, but as a necessary and surprisingly influential detour. The emotional landscape of Tokyo Drift is defined by a pervasive sense of displacement that permeates every character, even the seemingly entrenched Han. Sean's journey isn't just about learning a new driving technique. It's an enforced quest for belonging. He arrives in Shibuya, carrying the weight of parental disappointment, his father's heavy-handed attempts at discipline only fueling his rebellious nature. This initial vulnerability makes him susceptible to the easy camaraderie offered by Twinkie and the more complicated mentorship of Han. The raw desperation in Sean's early driving mirrors his personal need to prove his worth in a place where he has no history or social capital. He drives because in Los Angeles, it was the only way to make noise. In Tokyo, it becomes the only way to learn silence, the silence of perfect control required for drifting. Neela, the female lead, offers another fascinating study in navigating cultural boundaries. Her involvement with Takashi, the established king, places her in a position of perceived loyalty. Yet her admiration for Han and her quiet respect for Sean's unconventional spirit suggest a yearning for authenticity that the rigid hierarchy of the underworld denies her. Her decision to stand by Sean in the final race, despite the obvious danger of crossing Takashi, is a powerful, non-verbal statement about allegiance shifting from power structure to genuine connection. She recognizes the passion in Sean's pursuit, a passion that Takashi, whose success is built on inherited wealth and reputation, can never truly replicate. Han Lue's charisma operates on a different frequency entirely. He is the expatriate who has found a sophisticated, if illicit, equilibrium. His coolness is not arrogance. It is the result of having navigated far more dangerous waters than a simple street race. When he offers Sean the keys to the iconic orange Veilside RX-7, it is an act of bestowing responsibility, not just a loan. His philosophy, often delivered through laconic, almost Zen-like pronouncements about the fluidity of life and the inevitability of fate, serves as a direct antidote to the American focus on brute force winning. The scene where he explains the physics and philosophy of drifting, illustrating how the car must be guided through the slide rather than forced, is the film's spiritual core. This is a man who understands that in high-stakes environments, survival often depends on embracing the skid rather than fighting it. A lesson that transcends the asphalt and applies directly to his own precarious existence within the Yakuza's orbit. The atmosphere is constantly charged, thickened by the smoke from burning tires and the pervasive scent of high-octane fuel. The sensory experience of the film elevates the driving sequences from mere action set pieces to almost ritualistic performances. The underground garages become sanctuaries, filled with gearheads whose devotion to engineering detail rivals that of any artisan. This meticulous attention to the modification of vehicles, the aerodynamic kits, the specific tire pressures, The delicate balancing acts required for a successful drift humanizes the participants. They are not just reckless kids. They are technicians pouring their souls into mechanical extensions of themselves. The emotional investment in the car is palpable. Losing a race means damaging more than just a vehicle. It means damaging one's carefully constructed identity within this isolated community. The stakes are higher because the commitment to the craft is absolute. This focus on the technical artistry provided a necessary depth that allowed the franchise to eventually scale up without losing its initial reverence for the automotive skill set. The introduction of Han also subtly sets the stage for the recurring theme of found family, a motif that will become the bedrock of the later installments. For Sean, adrift and directionless, Han's crew functions as the first stable relational structure he has encountered since arriving in Tokyo. This isn't the boisterous, integrated unit of Dom's family, but something more nuanced, a group bound by shared respect for skill and a mutual understanding of living slightly outside the lines of conventional society. Characters like Twinkie, with his exaggerated, almost performative Americanisms, serve as comic relief, but also as an initial bridge, signaling to Sean that not everyone views him as a threat or a nuisance. His infectious enthusiasm for American culture, even when filtered through a Japanese lens, highlights the cultural exchange inherent in the setting. The emotional tension surrounding Han is inextricably linked to the film's greatest retroactive contribution to the franchise, his impending fate. Even without knowing the precise trajectory of his arc, there is an underlying melancholic beauty to his confidence. He operates with a certain graceful fatalism, suggesting a man who has already seen the worst outcomes and found a way to enjoy the remaining moments. This preparedness for loss makes his mentorship both precious and inherently temporary. When he entrusts Sean with the keys and the mission, it is an act loaded with unspoken farewell. His final quiet departure from the street racing scene, orchestrated seemingly without fanfare, speaks volumes about the transient nature of these high-stakes environments. For the viewer aware of the timeline, this scene is saturated with dramatic irony, transforming Han from merely a mentor into a tragic figure whose wisdom is bought at a high price. Contrast this with Takashi's emotional barrenness. His rage is brittle, fueled by insecurity, masking overwhelming privilege. When Sean beats him in the final race, driving Han's car, using Han's philosophy, it is a symbolic coup. Sean isn't just winning a trophy, he is claiming the mantle of true artistry over inherited status. Takashi's defeat signifies the failure of entitlement when confronted with earned ability and spiritual connection to the machine. The visual language of this final showdown emphasizes the difference. Takashi drives with rigid control, fighting the slide. Sean drives with necessary abandon, flowing with it, embodying the spirit Han tried to impart. Furthermore, the film's handling of the Japanese setting avoids mere exoticism by grounding the action in genuine automotive expertise. The obsession with weight reduction, the precision of the suspension tuning, required to maintain control during extreme slip angles, and the sheer technical demands of the mountain passes, Touge, elevate the craft beyond simple street bravado. The audience is invited into a technical conversation, making the spectacle feel earned rather than arbitrary. This dedication to niche expertise provides the emotional payoff when Sean finally executes a perfect drift. It is the acknowledgement from the elite community that the outsider has finally internalized their language, not just mimicked their movements. Tokyo Drift, therefore, succeeds not just as a bridge for the franchise, but as a deeply felt portrait of what happens when alienation meets a hyper-specific, demanding passion, forcing rapid, intense personal growth under neon lights. The stylistic divergence orchestrated by placing the narrative in Tokyo also necessitated a complete re-evaluation of cinematic pacing and visual saturation, marking a pronounced departure from the sun-bleached, gritty realism that characterized the earlier installments set in Los Angeles. Director Justin Lin consciously embraced a heightened, almost hyper-real aesthetic. The city itself becomes a crucial, kinetic character, its density and verticality amplifying the feeling of claustrophobia and pressure that Sean experiences. The night sequences, drenched in the vibrant, almost aggressive glow of neon signage, are meticulously crafted to mirror the internal chaos of the characters. The racing is a release valve for pent-up urban tension. This visual palette served as a deliberate refreshment, signaling to the audience that while the core concept of vehicular competition remained, the execution would be vastly more stylized and international in scope. This visual ambition is most evident in the depiction of the driving sequences themselves, particularly the famous Shibuya crossing scene. While often criticized for its logistical impossibility in a real-world context, its cinematic success lies in its theatricality. It's a moment where the rules of physics and societal norms are suspended entirely, reflecting the protagonist's descent into an all-consuming obsession. The silence during the actual drift across the crossing, punctuated only by the high-pitched scream of tires fighting for purchase, is a masterstroke of sound design, momentarily isolating Sean and Han from the surrounding momentarily paralyzed metropolis. It is a temporary victory over the mundane structure of Tokyo life, a declaration of arrival achieved through mastery of the machine. The emotional undercurrent driving the romantic subplot between Sean and Neela also benefits from this stylistic framing. Their connection is forged in shared opposition to Takashi's rigid control and the suffocating expectations of the established scene. Neela's quiet resilience and her ability to maintain a sense of self despite her proximity to power make her an anchor for Sean's volatile emotional state. Unlike the more overtly aggressive relationships seen in previous films, the bond here is built on mutual understanding of their status as outsiders. Sean, the foreigner, and Neela, the woman caught between two powerful male spheres. Their shared glances across crowded race meets convey an understanding that transcends language, rooted in the shared language of risk and respect on the tarmac. Ultimately, the film's ability to integrate this disparate crew, the American novice, the seasoned mentor with a shadowed past, the local girl finding her footing, and the exuberant American in Japan comic relief, into a functional, albeit temporary unit, hinges on the unifying principle of the drift. Drifting requires a level of trust between driver and environment that is almost spiritual. It demands that one relinquish absolute control to achieve ultimate precision. This philosophy becomes the narrative glue, allowing characters from wildly different backgrounds to coalesce around a single, challenging, and intensely beautiful pursuit. Tokyo Drift thus acts as a necessary crucible, forging the thematic elements of found family and mastery through unconventional means, themes that would prove essential for the global expansion of the Fast universe. The introduction of the film's supporting cast, particularly the mechanics and technical advisors who orbit Han's operation, further fleshes out the world's authenticity. These figures, often seen huddled over engine bays littered with specialized tools, represent the true heart of the underground tuning scene, the quiet dedication to the science beneath the spectacle. They embody a meritocracy based purely on demonstrable mechanical aptitude, a refreshing contrast to the status-driven hierarchies represented by Takashi's inherited wealth. Their meticulous work on Han's cars, transforming production models into precision instruments capable of sustaining the extreme forces of professional drifting, underscores that the film is dedicated to honoring the engineering craft as much as the thrill of the race. This technical background grounds the seemingly magical feats performed by the drivers. It shows that Han's mastery isn't magic, but the culmination of intimate knowledge married to innate talent. The film's pacing masterfully builds suspense, not just around who will win, but around when the inevitable betrayal or consequence of Han's lifestyle will arrive. There is an unspoken tension in every interaction Han has with the Yakuza associates, a lingering threat that their comfortable bubble is temporary. This inherent instability makes the scenes of camaraderie feel more precious, imbued with the knowledge that these moments of shared triumph under the lights are borrowed time. When Han delivers lines about savoring the moment, the audience feels the weight of that counsel, understanding it's not merely a driving tip, but a profound life philosophy learned through harsh experience. His quiet charisma serves as a mask for constant vigilance, a crucial character trait that sets him apart from the more overtly confident and ultimately less street-smart protagonists of the earlier films. Sean's character arc requires him to shed his American arrogance, a process facilitated by physical humiliation on the track. His early, disastrous attempts at drifting are essential viewing because they establish the massive gulf between his perceived skill and the actual demands of the discipline. He is forced to dismantle his ego piece by piece. When he finally begins to grasp the concept of feel, of becoming one with the car's slide rather than fighting it, the emotional payoff is immense because the struggle was so visibly painful. This shift represents an emotional maturation, realizing that true power lies not in dominance, but in alignment with the dynamic forces at play. It's a lesson learned through humility, mirroring the journey of any aspiring artist or craftsman who must first understand the constraints of their medium before they can transcend them. The narrative deliberately uses the visual vocabulary of Tokyo, the crowded, narrow streets juxtaposed with the vast, impersonal towers, to reflect the characters' internal isolation and their drive to create small, intense pockets of community. The winding mountain passes, the Touge, become metaphorical proving grounds where the external pressures of the city are distilled into a pure, high-speed contest. These locales force the characters into intense, focused interaction, stripping away superficialities. By the film's conclusion, Sean is no longer just an entitled American delinquent. He is a driver who has earned respect in a foreign land by mastering a difficult, alien art form. His victory over Takashi is less a victory for America over Japan, and more a victory for genuine dedication over inherited complacency, a thematic resolution that provides a satisfying closure to this localized chapter, while setting the stage for the expansive, personality-driven future of the saga. The film's dedication to portraying the Wangan racing culture, beyond just drifting, subtly enriches the world-building, even if the primary focus remains on the controlled chaos of the drift. The mention of high-speed, point-to-point runs along Tokyo's highways, a realm often associated with raw speed and mechanical endurance, serves as a constant background threat, underscoring the diverse and unforgiving nature of Japanese street racing. This backdrop implies a deeper structure of respect and fear that governs all illicit activities in the city, making Han's position as a respected intermediary all the more precarious. His dealings, hinted at being tied to both legitimate high-end automotive circles and the shadowy elements of the organized underground, suggest a complex balancing act that Sean, in his youthful zeal, entirely overlooks. Han is not just a street racer, he is a survivor, navigating a maze of unspoken obligations. The dynamic between Han and Sean is powerfully articulated through their contrasting relationships with their tools of the trade. Sean treats his initial cars, and even the gifted RX-7 as extensions of his own explosive energy, often pushing them past their limits in pursuit of an immediate result. Han, conversely, treats the vehicle as a sacred trust. His emotional attachment is not to ownership, but to the flawless execution enabled by perfect tuning. This difference manifests clearly in the stakes of the final race. Sean is fighting for validation and to protect his newfound community, driving a car entrusted to him. When he wins, he returns the vehicle, scuffed but intact, a gesture signifying that he has honored the trust placed in him, completing the transition from reckless consumer to responsible practitioner. This contrasts sharply with Takashi, whose focus is purely proprietary. His cars are extensions of his wealth, and their destruction represents a financial and ego-based injury rather than a spiritual one. Furthermore, the film successfully utilizes the visual contrast between the highly polished, almost pristine look of the cars, optimized for drifting, high-grip tires, pristine paint jobs, and the inherent dirtiness of the activities they engage in, smoking tires, street dust, near crashes. This juxtaposition highlights the Japanese cultural reverence for technical perfection existing within an inherently rebellious framework. The mechanics are artists striving for flawless performance in an imperfect, illegal context. This duality, the pursuit of absolute mechanical purity amidst the grit of illegal competition, is what attracts Sean, who is himself desperately trying to polish his own rough edges into something functional and respected. The fleeting moments shared between Han and his crew, a shared meal, a quiet nod of approval after a successful run, speak volumes about the emotional currency of their relationships. These aren't formalized declarations of brotherhood. They are earned quiet acknowledgments of shared risk and mutual competence. This low-key emotional expression makes the eventual climax, particularly Han's exit, hit with greater force. The lack of overt sentimentality means that when the bonds are tested or broken, the impact is felt through the sudden absence of that quiet support structure, leaving Sean truly alone to face the final confrontation, armed only with the skills and philosophy he absorbed during his apprenticeship. This silent covenant between the drifters forms the emotional undercurrent that the later, louder franchise entries would attempt to replicate through explicit declaration. The mentorship dynamic established between Han and Sean serves as the central emotional anchor, and its execution hinges on Han's strategic withholding of information, which paradoxically deepens Sean's reliance on his teacher's wisdom. Han never overtly dictates. Instead, he presents opportunities for Sean to fail safely, or to observe the inherent consequences of impulsive action. This Socratic method of instruction, applied to the high-octane environment of drifting, forces Sean to internalize lessons about physics, respect, and timing that mere instruction could never achieve. The driving sequences transition from displays of raw, untamed American horsepower to balletic displays of controlled momentum, because Sean is learning to think like the environment, not fight against it. This is the key philosophical underpinning that elevates the film above simple tuner culture appreciation. It is a narrative about achieving harmony through acknowledging limits. The introduction of Han's past is skillfully managed through implication rather than exposition in this installment, adding layers of gravity to his calm demeanor. His familiarity with various international racing enclaves, suggested by his ability to move smoothly between different dialects and customs, hints at a life spent perpetually on the run, or operating in gray areas where loyalty is fluid and consequences are swift. This shadowy background makes his desire to mentor Sean feel almost like an attempt at expiation, or perhaps a final act of positive influence before his own debts come due. For Sean, who comes from a background of relative comfort and parental oversight, Han represents true freedom, yet the audience perceives the subtle, ever-present shackles that bind Han to his path. Neela's role is vital in mediating the cultural tension and providing Sean with a localized emotional compass. Her attraction to Sean is rooted in his unvarnished outsider energy, the very qualities that make him disruptive to the established order. In a society that values smooth, indirect communication, Sean's directness is refreshing, even if it is clumsy. Neela is effectively caught between the rigid structure represented by Takashi and the fluid potential embodied by Sean. Her choice to support Sean in the final race is not just a romantic gesture. It is in alignment with the principle of earned mastery over inherited privilege. She seeks authenticity, and Sean, despite his flaws, is undeniably authentic in his struggle. The sound design of the film plays a crucial, often overlooked role in conveying emotion. The roaring, high-revving engines and the screech of tires are balanced by moments of near silence during the crucial drift transitions, emphasizing intense concentration. This sonic contrast mirrors the characters' internal lives, the outward chaos of their existence juxtaposed with the internal stillness required to operate at the limit. When Sean finally executes a perfect drift, the soundscape shifts. The jarring noise of near loss is replaced by the smooth, almost purring sound of the car holding its line. This auditory reward signifies that he has finally listened, finally understood, and thus achieved the necessary emotional and technical integration. Tokyo Drift is, at its core, a story about learning to listen, to the car, to the mentor, and finally, to the silence between the noise. The film's exploration of the diaspora of automotive passion, moving from the American emphasis on raw horsepower and straight-line dominance to the Japanese focus on finesse and angular momentum, is a crucial element of its identity. This geographical shift dictates the character development. Sean cannot win by simply being louder or faster in the American style. He must adopt the local dialect of speed, which is drifting. This necessity forces a deep engagement with the culture, moving him beyond the superficial enjoyment of fast cars into the realm of genuine craftsmanship. His initial failures are not just embarrassing defeats. They are necessary rites of passage that strip away his inherited sense of entitlement to success. Han Lu remains the film's most enduring contribution to the franchise because he embodies the concept of sophisticated survival. His cool detachment is a defense mechanism forged from years of operating in environments where one mistake can lead to terminal consequences, far beyond a simple loss on the track. When he talks about stealing from the competition, a philosophy echoed in his later appearances, it is done with a pragmatism that contrasts sharply with the more moralistic narratives that would follow. Han operates in a morally gray zone, defined by personal codes rather than external law, making him an aspirational yet dangerous figure for the earnest Sean. His advice to Sean about feeling the car, about anticipating the physics of the slide, functions as a metaphor for navigating life's uncertainties. Don't rigidly oppose the forces working against you. Learn to use them for momentum. The supporting cast surrounding Han, the nameless mechanics and tuners, serve as a silent chorus, representing the unwavering commitment to technical excellence that validates the entire underground scene. Their shared dedication to perfecting camber angles and weight distribution provides the bedrock of trust upon which Han's operation rests. Sean gains acceptance not when he wins a race, but when he begins to speak their technical language, showing respect for the engineering integrity of the machine. This subtle shift in focus, from driver ego to mechanical respect, is what truly bridges the cultural gap for him. The emotional core of the film lies in the bittersweet nature of Han's mentorship. Given the narrative context that follows, his every positive interaction with Sean carries the shadow of impending loss. This imbues the moments where Han casually tosses Sean the keys or offers a philosophical observation with significant pathos. It is the wisdom of a man who knows his time is limited, pouring concentrated experience into a protege as a form of legacy building. Sean's eventual victory, using Han's car and principles, feels less like a personal triumph and more like the successful completion of a difficult assignment handed down by a superior, whose own fate remains tragically ambiguous. The film, through this specific character focus, managed to introduce a profound layer of fatalism into a franchise previously concerned primarily with immediate thrills, setting a higher, more resonant emotional bar for its future installments. The visual language of Tokyo Drift is intrinsically linked to its thematic exploration of cultural assimilation through performance. The deliberate use of saturated, almost hallucinatory colors in the racing scenes, the deep blues, electric greens, and burning oranges reflecting off the slick asphalt, functions as a manifestation of the adrenaline and sensory overload inherent in drifting. This aesthetic choice separates the film visually from its predecessors, positioning it not just geographically, but tonally as a distinct entity. The cars themselves become canvases. Their liveries are loud declarations of identity in a space where spoken words are secondary to mechanical prowess. The vibrant customization reflects an intense personal investment, turning the vehicles into mobile extensions of the driver's submerged psyches, shouting what they cannot articulate through polite conversation. Sean's transformation is most clearly visible in his growing comfort within this visual excess. Initially overwhelmed by the sensory data of the Tokyo streets, he gradually learns to filter the noise, focusing only on the precise geometric lines required for a perfect drift. His ability to navigate the narrow, complex urban environment with newfound confidence signals that he has truly internalized the Tokyo style, moving beyond simply imitating the maneuvers. This internal shift is mirrored externally when his driving becomes cleaner, less frantic, embodying the necessary grace that Han preached. He stops wrestling with the car and starts dancing with it, a transition evident in the way his movements inside the cockpit become economical and focused. The antagonistic relationship with Takashi is brilliantly framed by their differing approaches to wealth and mastery. Takashi's driving style, while technically sound, is often described by Han's crew as lacking kokoro, heart, or soul. His precision is rooted in the entitlement afforded by his powerful family and his inherited title, the Drift King. He drives defensively, protecting his status and his expensive machinery. Sean, lacking any status markers, has nothing to lose but his pride and everything to gain in terms of self-respect. This disparity fuels the emotional stakes. Takashi is defending an established hierarchy, while Sean is fighting for the right to belong and to prove his merit on an equal, skill-based footing. Furthermore, the brief glimpses into the lives of the broader drift community, the gathering spots, the unspoken rules of engagement before a run, establish a powerful sense of community forged in shared risk. These interactions are characterized by a formal politeness that masks the lethal nature of their hobby. Even in defiance of the law, there is a profound respect for order and established hierarchy, which Sean initially breaches through sheer ignorance. It is Han who teaches him that true rebellion in this context isn't about breaking every rule, but about mastering the most difficult ones with skill, thereby earning the right to challenge the established order from within its own established parameters. This complex layering of rebellion and respect is what gives Tokyo Drift its unique narrative texture within the franchise canon. The overarching theme of displacement in Tokyo Drift finds its most poignant expression in the subtle tragedy of Han Lui's character arc, which this installment introduces with masterful narrative restraint. Han exists in a state of perpetual self-imposed exile, finding temporary sanctuary in the meticulously organized chaos of Tokyo's underground racing scene. His philosophy, often centering on the idea that life is ephemeral and best appreciated in fleeting, intense moments, is not just cool detachment. It is a survival mechanism cultivated after experiencing profound loss or betrayal within his previous associations, likely those hinted at being connected to organized crime or international trafficking. His calm exterior shields a deep-seated understanding of impermanence. When he teaches Sean, he is essentially preparing a successor, knowing his own tenure in this life is finite. This creates a quiet, paternal bond with Sean that is far deeper than mere friendship, rooted in the passing down of hard-won existential knowledge. The contrast between Han and the local Yakuza boss, an antagonist whose power is purely transactional and rooted in fear, highlights the difference between earned respect and coercive authority. Han commands loyalty because he delivers results and adheres to an internal code of honor regarding the integrity of the drive. The Yakuza representative operates on brute force and monetary leverage. When the inevitable confrontation arrives, it is Han's ethical framework, the commitment to the craft over personal gain, that sets the stage for his necessary, though initially ambiguous, departure. This departure is not a defeat, but a calculated extraction from an untenable situation, leaving behind a vital philosophical legacy in the form of the Orange RX-7 and the lessons imparted to Sean. Sean's victory in the climax is emotionally resonant, precisely because it is not achieved through superior engineering alone, but through the adoption of Han's mindset. The mountain pass drift, where Sean intentionally uses the momentum of the slide to navigate a blind corner, is the ultimate practical application of Han's teachings, embracing the skid to see what lies ahead. It is an act of faith in the physics and the mentor's guidance. This win doesn't just crown him the new Drift King, it validates Han's entire belief system to the skeptical Tokyo community. Sean proves that the path of finesse and deep understanding yields superior results to the path of aggressive entitlement represented by Takashi. The introduction of the Raijin run, the term often used colloquially for high-stakes, unsanctioned runs, adds another layer of danger that underscores the character's precarious existence. These are not just races for bragging rights. They are tests of survival, where police intervention or rival faction aggression are constant possibilities. This ever-present environmental pressure explains the intensity of the camaraderie. These are people relying on each other for immediate physical safety, as much as for entertainment. Tokyo Drift subtly elevates the franchise by showing that the true bonds are formed not over barbecues and friendly challenges, but under the immediate threat of destruction, solidifying the idea that the Fast family, in all its permutations, is built on